One of my dear friends is a Texan, a friend of mine, David Long. There he is right there and caught up in one of his absolute favorite pastimes, trout fishing, fly fishing. He's a doctor, and I like to call him on occasion. And hopefully, when I do call him on these specific occasions, I like to get his voicemail. Because I like to call him every once in a while and leave a voicemail that says, "Hey, David, I'm simply calling you just to remind you that we're friends. I'm grateful for you. And I have no medical advice needed at this time." Because I'm sure he gets calls all the time, and a handful for me, about hey, so I got this thing going on. And I don't know how often he fields those phone calls. I did think about him this week, though, and I did ask him a question, because he is a doctor, and as I was thinking about the study that we're in, I wanted to ask him if there was a particular area of medicine where he notices a consistent pattern of treating the symptoms and not the actual root of the issue, getting to the root of what's going on. Because it's a lot of what we're stepping into in this study together, right? And his answer to me was an interesting one. He said, the example that I always use is insomnia. He said, people, particularly West Texans, apparently, get pretty adamant about getting to the root cause and not covering up the symptoms. He says, with one glaring exception: insomnia. He said, especially if the insomnia is because of alcoholism or some other substance abuse. He actually has a special passion in his heart for alcoholism and substance abuse, because he knows that over the years of medical treatment, decades ago, there was a stigma about how that was not an ailment or a disease, but just a poor choice. And so David personally, has worked for many, many years to continue to learn and grow and educate others on the dignity and the disease of substance abuse. And so there's a reason why he uses that particular denotation, especially if insomnia is due to alcoholism or substance abuse. He says they just want, that is anyone with insomnia, just want their sleeping medicines, and they are not interested in doing the hard work of fixing the underlying cause. So they don't really want to do the hard work to fix their anxiety or to manage their stress in such a way that the insomnia would improve or subside. He says essentially they just want their sleeping pills. We are in a sermon series where we are looking to really get to the root of the issue. We're calling it "Let Him Cook." And it is a study of what's called the antitheses, or 6 teachings in the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus uses the formula, "You have heard it said, but I say unto you." And we're calling it "Let Him Cook" because we genuinely do want to, as the phrase from culture suggests, to give someone space and time to do their thing. We want to give Jesus space and time to do his thing. The aim of this study, we want to create room for an unhurried listen to the words of Jesus. And we want to allow this teaching to speak into our lives. And then we want to follow him into his abundant life. Now, today, we're on number 2 out of the 6. We're going to look at adultery and lust. So we're going to be in Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 through 30. And if you want to grab an actual physical Bible, we have some over here, and we have some over here, and some on that back table as well. If you are going to grab this Bible, I would encourage you to open it to page 12, 24, and 25. That's where we will be today. As you grab a Bible, I would love to say a couple of things before we begin today. One, I want to acknowledge that this particular Sunday, and really over the course of the next several Sundays, This is sensitive content. This is really weighty stuff. And so one thing I want to say, like particularly today, if adultery is a part of your story and a part of your history, our aim today is not to go and exhume that, to dig it back up, and alongside of it, all the pain and all that. That is not our aim or our intent at all. Our aim and our intent, again, is to get into the Bible, get next to and close to the heart of God and the teachings of Jesus, and listen for where he is inviting us into. What is he inviting us away from and into? And so if that is a part of your story, please know that we approach that with the greatest level of compassion and care. And our heart's desire is that you would resonate with the wisdom of words Jesus when he mentions the hurtful spaces that it is, and say, yes, I know that hurt. But also hear his invitation and say, yes, I'm on the path. I long to be in the direction that he's inviting us to go toward. The other thing that I want to say is that because this is sensitive content, we will likely, all of us, on some level, will sense an appropriate measure of conviction. Appropriate and important measure of conviction. It might make you feel uncomfortable a little bit, this content. But my encouragement to you would be just to kind of let it be. Because even this morning during 9:15 prayer, we were praying about that the Lord would add his covering to the conviction. And as we prayed through the word conviction more, I saw an interesting separation between the way that we use the word conviction in a church context and the way that we use the word conviction in a public context. Like if we say someone is a person of conviction, we say they're a person of passion. They're a person of resolve. There's something that there's a value that they've greatly identified and greatly pursued. And that's admirable and it's inspirational, it's compelling. When we say conviction in the church, I almost, after I look at this version of conviction, there's a part of me that's like going, okay, man, if we're not careful, this might tip more towards condemnation or hurt and so I genuinely believe Jesus is going to point out some things with a gentle correction and say, hey, let's go this direction. But I almost want to put out from the word's onset this morning, and like the conviction I think that the Lord is inviting us into is his way, his life, and his abundance. So let's have those two things in mind as we enter in together, and let's open up in a word of prayer. God, thank you so much for your presence in this place. I couldn't imagine, and I don't want to imagine, what it would look like to do relationship and life without you. Lord, lead us with your kindness. Holy Spirit, open our ears. Still our hearts. Invite us to sit with you today. I pray that we will say yes. I pray that we will hear your voice. And I pray that as we leave here, Lord, we leave here knowing we have a greater understanding of who you are, how you are, where you are, and our next step in our life with you. We ask for it in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, just like last week, we're going to see this essential three-part section in these three short verses. Jesus will recap an Old Testament teaching. He will add his words. He will expound on that Old Testament teaching. And then this week, he gives us two short hyperboles to help us in walking out, understanding, and connecting with the teaching. So we'll begin. Here are all three verses. Matthew 5, again, verses 27 through 30 from the New King James. The words of Jesus, and he says, "You have heard that it was said to those of old, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So if your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. It is more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, well, cut it off and cast it from you. For it is more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. Now, last week I mentioned that there is a podcast that the Bible Project is doing for the whole year of 2024 where they're going through the Sermon on the Mount. And because of that podcast, they actually have an episode that is devoted to each one of these antitheses. And so in that most recent podcast for this episode, for this text, which I'll have a link for at the end of the service, Tim Mackey actually shares his translating of Matthew 5. And so, for example, as the scholar that he is and as the theologian that he is at the core of Bible Project, when they have their meetings and talk about all the media and the podcasts and the content they're going to produce to help people connect and understand and grab hold of the Word of God, he can sit there with a Greek Bible and translate it and work with those that he works with. So these are his translate. It's just like if he were to have a homework assignment in Greek to translate these words, this would be what he would turn in, right? He says, you have heard that it was said, you will not commit adultery. And so I say to you, everyone who goes on looking at a woman in order to cultivate lust for her, he has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And what's important there is, when I put it in yellow, is goes on looking is the actual like Greek parsing of that particular word. So it's not just so often it's translated looks. If you look or looks lustfully, right? But it's actually to look and to go on looking, right? So it is a sustained, decided upon activity in order to cultivate lust. So it's not just a look that keeps on looking, it's a look that keeps on looking with the intent to cultivate lust. So that's exactly what's being talked about. And then he goes on to say, if your right eye causes your downfall, tear it out and throw it from you. And for it's better to lose one of your body parts than for your whole body to be thrown into Gehenna, right? If your right hand causes your downfall, cut it off and throw it from you. It is better for you to lose one of your body parts than for your whole body to go off into Gehenna. Let's take it verse by verse and see what we can draw from Jesus' teaching. First, verse 27, you have heard it said to those of old, to the ancients, recorded in the Old Testament, you shall not commit adultery. Just a couple of things that I want us to frame up for today's discussion and today's look. First, this is a teaching on sex and desire. I realize that adultery is a breaking of a marriage covenant, right? But that's done through the context of sex and sexual intercourse. And so this isn't a marriage conversation, right? We're going to have that conversation next week, right? Because that's actually the very next thing that Jesus talks about. This is a talk about sex and desire, right? The next thing I want to say is that these are two significant motivators within us. There's something incredibly primal about us when it comes to sex. I mean, there's a survival component to us, even locked into the midbrain, right? So when the midbrain takes over from the frontal lobe, sex is an element of midbrain activity. So we are hardwired. It's incredibly significant. And desire as well. When we have clearly identified desire, holistic, family, whatever it may be, a longing within us, and we're walking out that longing, especially longings toward health, wholeness, and abundant living. I mean, like wholesome, healthy living. There is a part of us genuinely where we are like healthy and strong and happy and joyful, right? But when we are without a lot of our longings, then that's what creates anxiety and stress as well. So sex and desire, these are things that are significant motivators for us in general. So all I'm trying to say is we're super, these are major arteries of the soul, if you will. And by design, by God's design, these two things are meant to add a sacred richness to our lives. Like the Lord's design of sex and desire, it's interwoven into it, this sacred richness. But that sacred richness can also be distorted. And so Jesus begins with, do not commit adultery. But he wants to lead us to the deeper channels of what that distortion can look like. Let's go on to verse 28 now and see his words. He says, but I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So here's the deal. Jesus brings up this Old Testament law. It's the seventh of the 10 Commandments. Right, last week was the sixth, today's the seventh, so they're right back to back. And now, just like last week, he's going to begin to expound upon, take us to the more richer, full meaning and teaching that we see in that commandment. And so my hope is today there will be a part of us that grab hold of the revelation of Jesus, and we're going to go, oh, yeah. Oh, the revelation will hit us. The understanding will hit us. Like the Lord will impart something today that like we can put in our pocket and take home, right? Guys, I'm just going to be real with you though. What will also happen, because this is directed more to us than it is to the ladies. I think anybody, again, can have this in their heart. But by and large, my anticipation from a majority context would be that we would go, I think of like Chandler from Friends, right? Oh. And then the girl's going to go, yeah. Oh, yeah, right? That could happen today. So, first question, as we look at verse 28, how do I position myself when it comes to conversation, when it comes to being in a room or being in a crowd? And that's a helpful diagnostic tool for any human in the room who wants to see where we sit when it comes to being with Jesus in this conversation of how we hold our desires and each other. So, how do I position myself in a conversation? How do I position myself in a room? How do I position myself in a crowd? Because what I genuinely believe Jesus is underscoring for us, illuminating for us, is there's a point where a line is crossed. And his invitation is to not cross that line. Follow me for a second. If we are in a conversation or in a room or in a crowd, we know what it feels like to be noticed. Like in the most wholesome way, right? If I were to see Sonny, I don't know, at Rouse's somewhere, I'd be like, Sonny! Like I would notice him. Or like even today, I noticed the awesome matchup, the awesome pairing, and she's just loving it, of Linnell's shoes and her blouse. I noticed it. And there's something about that is genuinely Jesus. Jesus genuinely, the most wholesome, encouraging, genuine, life-giving way he notices us. Okay? So we know that, right? We all know. We know what that notice, we know what it's like to be noticed. Now then, for those who are single in the room or who can remember back to those days, we also know what it's like to be noticed. Right? Like in a good way. Like you're looking to be noticed, they're looking to be noticed, and there's a moment of noticing. We're like, oh. Still wholesome, right? That's, again, hardwired deep within us that something magical is happening, right? But then if you just go one step further, we know what it's like to be noticed. Yeah, right there. Whoa, right? Whoa. There's a point where it gets gross. There's a point where it's offensive. There's a point where it is uncomfortable. And one of the most helpful phrases for me in thinking about this and stewarding it in my own life is unwelcome attention. Right? I don't ever want to be someone who gives unwelcome attention to another person. And again, that can be done in a lot of different ways, right? Whether it's envy or criticism, but we're having a conversation specifically on how we feel and how we hold others. But that's the moment that the line is crossed. When we get into that space, this is what Jesus begins to highlight. This is the spectrum. So adultery is at the very least an act or the consistent action, a sustained relationship of sex outside of the context of marriage. When we begin to follow Jesus into the heart, that can be a sustained habit. Things like catcalling or objectification or any kind of other, I don't want to list tons of them, or just simply the sustained stare. Or perhaps we have the maturity to keep our mouth shut, but the immaturity to not keep ourselves in check and point ourselves in a different direction. This is like the diagnostic area that Jesus is inviting us into. This is the thing that he wants us to address. Where am I on the sustained stare, on the sustained habit? Where am I on the sustained relationship? And if you find yourself, if you can look at that spectrum and go, yeah, man, I'm right there, then that acknowledgement is where we go to verse 29 and 30. And Jesus would say, if your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. It's more profitable for you that you would lose one of your members than for your whole body to be cast into hell. And then also the right hand that's causing you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. For it is more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. And what's interesting about this is that we are clearly talking about a heart posture and a heart attitude and a heart resolve. And so one of the mysteries of Jesus' teaching is that then he gives us a physical teaching. Because if you were to actually cut out your eye, could you go on lusting in your heart? You could. And the same is true of cutting off your hand. He is addressing the heart, and yet gives us something that we can clearly envision. Whether it's cartoonish or gory, we can really envision this teaching. We can see this hyperbole, and it's extreme, right? It's exaggerative, but with great clarity, we can see it. When I believe Jesus is dramatically warning us to take decisive action on anything within us that would lead us away from him and into sin and destruction. And when it comes to something like lust or desire or these expressions of sex outside of God's design for sex, it is simply a path in that direction. And the path looks like this. We, at some point, whether it be, again, in conversation, in a room, in a group, or in relationship, we'll either maintain the posture of Jesus and think to ourselves, what can I give to this person? So when I step into a relationship with PJ, I'd be like, man, I notice PJ. I'm aware of PJ. I'm open. As I begin the conversation, I begin to listen to PJ. Now, I'm positioning myself. I'm posturing myself to go, okay, like, what can I give to him today? Right? I'm not approaching him. Now, I wonder what I can get from, there's PJ. And PJ drives a nice car. I wonder if I can. Right? Like, all of a sudden now we're looking to like draw, right? And so that's obviously that is nowhere near the spectrum of what we're talking about today, but that is where it begins. This idea of like what I can get, what can I take from this person? And that is the heart matter that Jesus is really driving us toward. Heart matters are not resolved externally. So like one of the most common, and unfortunately it's been around our Christian conversations for years, well, if girls would only dress more modest, right? That's an external solution to an internal problem, right? You cannot externally position yourself to deal with your heart. You must at some point take the bold, courageous work of dealing with your heart. And again, this study, man, this isn't fast stuff. I'm not going to close today with like, here are 3 things you can do, and you can just walk yourself right. That's not how this works. Once we notice this is long work, and that's what Jesus is inviting us into. But his clear invitation, again, is that we would take decisive action. We must find out what needs work within us and commit ourselves to that work. So again, if we go back to the spectrum for a second, and if there's somebody here today that you know this is an issue for you. I hate using those words, but like you look at that spectrum and you go, yeah, I know I'm at on that spectrum. I believe Jesus' invitation is for us to identify the destructive pattern that we are cultivating. Whether it's something as simple as a sustained stare or a sustained habit, or a sustained relationship. Like, let's identify the pattern. And the next thing, let's create immediate distance, right? Cut it off and throw it out. So if it is a habit, if it is a person, if it is a circumstance or relationship, even if it is something that you just know you consistently are allowing yourself to participate in, throw it from you. And when I say that, it's more than just get rid of that. It's like realize that you're holding a bomb that will destroy you and others. And Jesus didn't give you, and Jesus didn't design. And so you take that and get it out. Call it for what it is and toss it. Right? The next thing is confess the matter to someone you trust. Bring it into the light. And we're not going to do that at the end of the day's service either, right? Because everybody be all like, prayers at the back. Everybody's all like, right? We're not going to do that today. But I will tell you, I know we have a lot of friends in this church. If you know where you're at, man, find somebody and say it out loud. Because that begins the conversation. You're identifying where your safe people are, but it allows you to begin to deal with this, as opposed to just keep it in here and try and do it on your own. It's not how the kingdom works. God knows we have strength in numbers. Find your people and confess it. And then finally, learn the why behind the what. And that's the long work. That's the long work. But the first 3 we can do before we go to bed tonight. Can we do a quick experiment? I'm going to show you a picture, and I want you to tell me what you see. You ready? Say it out loud. Oh, wait. You good, David? Yeah. I didn't want to advance. All right, brother. Appreciate you. All right. I'm going to show you a picture. Just tell me what you see. Cool. Let's go again. Lemonade. Yep, good. Let's go again. Yeah, let's go a little throwback to the first week, right? Check it. We didn't say handle. We didn't say pot. Right? I mean, you might have said coffee pot if you're thorough. We immediately acknowledged the inside. Now, that would be a lot more difficult if all those weren't glass, right? If those were like if it were made of this material, there were 3 vases up there that were made of clay, you couldn't see inside of them. Well, that would be a little, the insides are obvious. In our body, the insides are not, and again, we are biologically hardwired at the midbrain to recognize the form. And there's a part of that that's by Jesus' design, beautiful and enriches our lives. But this helped me this week. Understand what we read in 1 Samuel. When Samuel's looking for the next king of Israel, and it says, so it was when they came that he looked at Eliab and said, surely this is the Lord's anointed. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look at his appearance or at his physical stature, because I have refused him. The Lord does not see as man sees. Man looks at the outward appearance. The Lord looks at the heart. Jesus is inviting us away from this shallow connection with each other. And guys, I want to see people the way Jesus sees people. And I'm on the spectrum too. I mean, whether it's lust dust or lust boulders, right? I think all of us have some of this to work out, and we're going to. But I tell you right now, I want to see people the way Jesus sees people. That's what I want. I want to walk into a room noticing people the way he notices people. I dang sure don't want to walk into a room noticing people in a way that makes them feel uncomfortable, right? No way. Jesus invites us to see all of creation, all of it, eternity, the things that are here and things that will remain with his abundant and complete perspective, to engage it with curiosity and generosity. What can I bring to the situation? And to leave it better than we found it.